Hey, I hope you're doing well. Question for you today. How hard are you trying on the court? I mean, I know like you're trying, on the courts and you're putting in effort and energy, but relative to, let's say, like your peak or your maximum effort or energy, how hard are you really pushing yourself? How hard are you actually trying? Well, I realized just last week that after 30 years of playing tennis, coaching tennis, being around tennis, that I never really knew for sure, and I solved it last week. Like I found out for sure last week. And the reason or the way that I came about having this happen was I started getting into road cycling like 3 or 4 months ago, kind of towards the end of summer of this year. And I discovered that I enjoyed it way more than I thought I would. B, it was a really big and satisfying physical challenge. And C, I found out through road cycling that when you like really kind of get into road cycling, you're kind of, like how you are with tennis probably, where you just love it, like you can't get enough of it, like you really want to do more and get better and be the best that you can be, then there's tons of data that is not at all existent for tennis players. Your whole bike basically becomes a computer that tracks your speed and your cadence and your power output. And then you wear a heart monitor, and this is where the connection was. You wear a heart monitor and you track your heart rate in real time. And when you compare the amount of power that you're putting out, like to the pedals, and how hard your body is working by tracking your heart rate, and there's all kinds of other stuff too, but because you have the benefit of just sitting there, and you can have your smartphone there, you can have real time all kinds of like data being fed to you, and it's really cool. It's really interesting to watch. So you start to realize like really quickly where your threshold is, like where is my limit as far as my amount of power output, my amount of like heart rate, like where's that point where it's like, man, I really don't want to be here anymore. And this is really like uncomfortable because my body's just being pushed so hard. So I found out for me that when I'm cycling somewhat regularly, then I can settle into kind of a comfortable zone around 150 beats per minute. But anytime I get above 160, then that's for me kind of the point where it's like my body starts kind of freaking out a little bit, like subconsciously, and saying like, okay, what do we do to like, we got to get things a little bit calmed down here. Like this is too intense, this is too high. And that's just where, for me right now, my current fitness level, that's just where it happens to be. So it dawned on me, I have no idea what it is on a tennis court. Like 30 years of being in tennis, I have no idea what my heart rate is. I've never had like a smartwatch or like a Fitbit. Like I know those will give you kind of ballpark estimates of heart rate, but I've never had one of those. And so 3 decades of tennis and I have no clue. I've never worn a heart rate monitor before to have any idea. And now that I've spent some time on a bike, and kind of pushing myself and figuring out kind of where my limit or threshold physically is for pushing myself. Is it higher on a tennis court? Is it lower? Like I have no idea. So last week I trained with Mark Sanset, if you follow our training videos, and I wore the heart rate monitor and I had an iPad set up so I could track my heart rate in real time. Like it shows second by second updates, and it was super interesting to watch. So just to give you an idea, during my kind of like dynamic warm up, like 20 minutes of like just kind of jogging and dynamic stretching and stuff like that, I was around 100 or so beats per minute. And then we were just kind of doing short courts. I was at like 105, 110. When we were doing rallies to each other, and intensity was starting to raise, then I was at like 130 or 140. And it wasn't until I didn't really peak until like two different times. When we started doing volleys and overheads, and kind of a combination of like me hitting overheads and like volleys and moving up and back, then I started to kind of start to get close to hitting 160. And when we played points and we would have a longer point, that's when I would see my peak. And my peak was 167, which was the highest I've ever seen my heart rate go. So, and it was interesting to watch me like recover too. Like we would finish a game to 7 and I'd be up at like 150, 155, 160. It was interesting to sit down, take a drink of water and see how quickly like my heart rate would drop down to like 110 to where it's pretty comfortable at like 110. Like I know just from cycling, I can hang out at 150 if I need to, but it's above 160 where in points, like I could feel this. Like if I would finish a long point and I'd start spiking above 160, which it takes a little while for your heart to kind of like catch up to the intensity that you just did a second ago. Those would be the points where all of a sudden it's like my vision starts getting a little jumpy and a little jittery. I start to overswing and get a little bit over intense because I'm just out of control of like my body, my biology. So my question for you today, I'm just kind of sharing like this is my experience. Do you know? Because here's the thing, in my experience coaching tennis, I know that a lot of players have a totally different experience between, let's say, practice and matches. Now, I'm going to wear a heart rate monitor on my next match as well because I'm really curious to watch it. But what is there a gap for you? And is there a gap? And by the way, like what's your peak heart rate? And how close do you actually even get? Like for me, hypothetically at age 41, my an average 41-year-old's peak heart rate is about 180. So for me to get to almost 170, I feel like it's probably like about as high as I want to push myself, really. But what would happen hypothetically if you wore a heart rate monitor and you only got to like 110 or 120? Well, you would know for sure, like, man, I've got some extra ceiling that I can push here. And so how hard are you really pushing yourself? Do you know? And how could you find out? Well, the heart rate that I wear, by the way, is like, I think it was like $40. So, and like a, nice one that goes like across your chest and tracks really accurately your real-time heart rate. And I used an app called Strava that you can get a free trial for and track. So here, let me show you really quick. I didn't even think about this ahead of time. But here, I'll show you the chart of, let's see, I gotta scroll back a little bit. Here's the chart of what my heart rate looked like during that training session. So you can see the peaks and the drop-offs. The drop-offs are, and you can see, by the way, my warm-up on the far right, like that's my dynamic warm-up. And I'm sorry, on the far left for you. And then on the far right, that's kind of like cool down. Mark and I are kind of like signing off, like on the camera, like for the YouTube video. And then the drops are water breaks, where we're kind of dropping well down. What is that? 100 and getting down, it's like 110, 120, like somewhere in there. Those are our water breaks. And then the very peaks are like the most intense chunks of our training. So I'm curious to see what this looks like during a match. These are pretty big chunks of like ground strokes, volleys, serve return, and then like game to 7, and so on and so forth. I'm really curious to watch, to see what it looks like on a match. So anyway, I would encourage you to find out for yourself. It's really good information. It's good context, and could really help you push yourself and get yourself physically to the next level. Hopefully that's helpful. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.